The court finds that the actions of Diana Hartfield, Robert Hartfield, Michael Hartfield, and Jennifer Hartfield constituted clear harassment of Maria Hartfield and caused severe emotional distress, the judge declared, her voice echoing through the suddenly silent courtroom. I sat motionless, my hands gripping the edge of the wooden bench until my knuckles turned white. At 50, I never imagined I'd be suing my own family, let alone winning. The weight of the moment pressed against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. Beside me, Grandma Eleanor reached over and covered my trembling hand with hers. Her touch was warm, steady just as it had been throughout my childhood when she'd comfort me after Mom's criticisms or Dad's cold disappointments. Family relationships must be founded on mutual respect, the judge continued, and the defendants have fundamentally violated this principle. Additionally, their abandonment of Eleanor Willoughby, despite her cognitive challenges they themselves emphasized, demonstrates a disturbing disregard for elder welfare. My attorney, Olivia Morrow, squeezed my shoulder gently. Breathe, Maria, she whispered. Across the aisle, I couldn't bring myself to look at them, my parents, my brother, his wife, the family that had used me as their convenient solution for decades. I could feel their eyes burning into me, filled with righteous indignation that I dared to expose their behavior to public scrutiny. How did we end up here? How did a lifetime of small surrenders lead to this courtroom, this irreparable rupture? It started with a phone call about Bob Dylan tickets 6 months ago. Or perhaps it started 20 years earlier, when I'd abandoned my dreams of becoming a writer to pursue the practical career my parents insisted upon. Or maybe it began in childhood, when I learned that my worth in the family depended on my usefulness. As the judge ordered my family to pay substantial damages and issue a public retraction of their statements, I closed my eyes. This victory felt hollow and complete at once, the end of my captivity and the beginning of an uncertain freedom. Flashback. The phone call, 6 months earlier. I'd been sitting at my small desk in my apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. The half-finished novel I'd been secretly working on for years mocked me with its incompleteness. At 50, with silver streaks in my once auburn hair and fine lines framing my eyes, I'd finally mustered the courage to revisit the dream I'd abandoned decades ago. The shrill ring of my phone shattered my concentration. The screen displayed Mom, and I felt that familiar tightening in my stomach, the Pavlovian response to years of guilt-inducing conversations. I almost didn't answer. But 30 years of conditioning is hard to break. You finally answered. Mom's voice dripped with that familiar guilt-inducing tone. I've been calling all day. My stomach twisted into knots. I was working, I replied automatically, closing the document that held my novel. Even in my 50s, I couldn't bring myself to tell her about my writing. The one time I'd shared my literary aspirations in college, she dismissed them with cutting efficiency. Writer's starve, Maria. You need something practical. Well, I want to talk about our plans for the holidays, she continued, a scheming undertone in her voice that made my heart race. The usual family thing, I guess, I answered cautiously. We're doing something different this year. My chest tightened. What do you mean? I got 4 tickets for Bob Dylan for 3 consecutive days. From the words 4 tickets, I immediately knew I wasn't included. The familiar pain of exclusion, a sensation I'd known since childhood when my brother Michael always came first, washed over me. Am I coming too? I asked, already knowing the answer. Well, about that. We have something important for you to do. My mouth went dry. What exactly? We need someone to look after Grandma. The request hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken expectations. For the past 2 years, I'd been the primary caregiver for Grandma Eleanor after her hip surgery, commuting daily to my parents' house while they continued their lives uninterrupted. So you mean while everyone enjoys the live concert, I'm supposed to stay over for 3 whole days and take care of Grandma? I clarified, feeling heat rise to my face. Don't be so dramatic, Mom said dismissively. You're always taking care of Grandma anyway, right? Besides, it's not like you have other plans. Something snapped inside me. Perhaps it was the casual way she dismissed my time. Or maybe it was the novel I'd just minimized on my screen, the embodiment of the dreams I'd sacrificed for this family. Were you ever planning to actually ask me? I said, my voice unnaturally calm. or did you just assume I'd agree, like always? Of course I thought you'd say yes, she replied, sounding genuinely confused by my resistance. You've always been a reliable girl, putting family first. A memory flashed through my mind. My college graduation 28 years ago, receiving my English literature degree with highest honors. Professor Winters had pulled me aside afterward. Your thesis was publication worthy, Maria. You have a gift. Don't waste it. But that very evening, Mom had announced that she'd spoken to her friend at the marketing firm about a stable position for me. We've already accepted on your behalf, Dad had added. It's time to put childish fantasies aside. Mom, I'm a grown woman, I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. I deserve to control my own time. The answer is no. The silence on the other end was deafening. Maria, don't be so selfish, she finally replied. This is a special vacation for everyone. Everyone except me, I fired back, my knuckles turning white around the phone. I can't believe you're ruining our plans with your selfishness, she snapped, and I could hear the genuine indignation in her voice. Selfish? You're the ones who made all the arrangements without even asking me, expecting me to gladly sacrifice 3 days of my life. Isn't that the definition of selfishness? That's enough, Mom said coldly. Your father will call you. Maybe you'll listen to him. Before she could hang up, I declared, if you expect me to be your caregiver, don't expect me to come home at all. I couldn't tell if she even heard me. Flashback. Family history. My relationship with my family has always been one-sided. During university, I sacrificed exam studies for family events and canceled important plans with friends to watch my brother Michael's games while he pursued his business degree. This was my normal life, the price of belonging. Dad, the stern accountant who valued practicality above all else, had grown up in poverty. Security first, dreams later, was his mantra, though the later never seemed to arrive. His own father had been an aspiring musician who died young, leaving the family destitute. This trauma shaped Dad's rigid worldview, a perspective he enforced on his children with unyielding resolve. Mom, once a marketing executive who'd clawed her way up the corporate ladder, measured everything in terms of social standing. What will people think? Was the question that guided her decisions. Her childhood in a small town where appearances mattered above all else had instilled in her a pathological need to maintain perfect family optics. Michael, my older brother by 3 years, had absorbed their values completely. He and his wife Jennifer had built a successful real estate business, given my parents 2 grandchildren, and fulfilled every expectation placed upon them. Their reward was unconditional approval, while I received conditional tolerance. The situation really deteriorated after Grandma Eleanor broke her hip 2 years ago. Although the surgery was successful, she began showing symptoms of dementia during recovery. The doctors explained that the shock of the fracture and surgery likely caused a rapid decline in her cognitive function. My parents and Michael's family, who all lived together in the sprawling family home, completely refused to take care of Grandma. We have jobs, they said, as if my work as a copywriter somehow didn't count. The only one left was me, living in a nearby apartment simply because I could work remotely. I suddenly became Grandma's primary caregiver, managing medications, doctor's appointments, helping with bathing and changing clothes. Everything fell on my shoulders as I commuted daily to care for her. Maria, you've always had a special relationship with Grandma since you were a child, my mother said when I expressed hesitation. You couldn't possibly think of putting her in a facility, could you? It was clever emotional manipulation. Of course, I didn't want to put Grandma in a facility. She had been my refuge during childhood, the one who slipped my English essays back to me with encouraging notes in the margins when Mom had dismissed them as a waste of time. She was the former high school English teacher who had secretly encouraged my writing, who had seen something in me that my parents refused to acknowledge. But while I took on the caregiving, my parents went on cruise vacations, and Michael and Jennifer went skiing every weekend. My life had completely stopped. That night after Mom's call, my apartment felt like a prison. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from my parents, which I sent straight to voicemail. Michael texted, Maria, think about what's best for the family. I laughed bitterly. In this family, what's best for the family always meant sacrifice yourself for everyone else's happiness. I collapsed onto my sofa and called Sarah, my best friend since college days. As a nurse who'd managed elder care for her own father, she knew all too well what I dealt with. Let me guess, she asked immediately. They're trying to rope you into caregiving again? This time is different, I said, surprised at my own firmness. I actually said no. I don't have to go along with their plans anymore. Good for you, Sarah said warmly. You've always given in too easily. You deserve your own time and space. But they won't stop calling, I sighed, feeling the weight in my chest. Dad keeps trying to reach me. Don't answer, Sarah said firmly. You've made your decision, right? They're just trying to wear you down. Thanks for saying that. I'm not being unreasonable, am I? Absolutely not, Sarah insisted. You're an adult. They need to respect your decisions. After we hung up, my phone rang again. It was from Dad this time. Despite Sarah's advice, I answered. Dad, my answer is still no, I said immediately. Maria? Robert's voice was measured and calm, the voice he used when closing business deals. We're just asking you to show some compassion for your family. Me lacking compassion? My voice cracked with emotion. You're the ones who don't respect my time or my life. There was a pause, and then his tone changed to one of reasonable compromise, a negotiation tactic I'd seen him use countless times. Fine, we'll handle the concert arrangements separately then, but could you at least come by that morning? Grandma really wants to see you. I hesitated, feeling suspicious but relieved at this seemingly reasonable compromise. Okay, I'll come just for that morning, but please stop trying to manipulate me into caregiving. I promise, he said smoothly. Thank you, Maria. After hanging up, uneasiness settled in my stomach. He had given in too quickly and easily. In 30 years, I'd never seen my father concede a point without extracting maximum advantage. Still, I felt proud for finally setting clear boundaries. Build up to betrayal. For the weeks leading up to the concert, I continued my daily routine at my parents' house, caring for Grandma while trying to maintain the fragile peace. No one discussed the upcoming concert day, creating an unspoken tension that hung in the air. I felt relieved that they'd accepted my boundary, but couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. The night before the concert, I texted my parents. I'll be there around 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you then. Mom replied almost instantly. Perfect, Maria. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I allowed myself a small smile. Perhaps things were changing. Perhaps they were finally seeing me as an independent adult with my own needs and boundaries. That evening, I sat at my laptop, opening the document I'd kept hidden for years. My novel about a woman in her 50s rediscovering her voice after a lifetime of silence had grown to 200 pages. I'd written in stolen moments, early mornings before work, late nights when insomnia claimed me. With trembling fingers, I typed a new line. She finally understood that it was never too late to begin again. The next morning, I woke early, filled with strange anticipation. I packed Grandma's medication and favorite snacks and loaded everything into my car. I'd chosen things I knew she'd appreciate. Her favorite Earl Grey tea, some audiobooks of classic literature, and photos from my recent copywriting projects. Driving to my parents' house, I felt surprisingly peaceful. Just a quick visit, see Grandma, drop off her things, and then back to my freedom, maybe even a few uninterrupted hours to work on my novel. The spring sunshine filtered through the trees lining the suburban street, and for the first time in years, I felt something like hope. But as I pulled up to the house, something felt wrong. My parents' car was missing, as were Michael and Jennifer's vehicles. The lights were on, but the house seemed oddly quiet. I frowned as I approached the front door with my bags. When I rang the doorbell, I heard slow, shuffling footsteps. The door opened to reveal Grandma looking confused. Maria, she exclaimed with genuine joy. You came. Of course, I smiled and hugged her frail form. Good morning, Grandma. Where is everyone? They all left, she answered, her voice suddenly clearer than I'd heard in months. They all went to that concert as planned. My blood ran cold as realization dawned. They had tricked me. They had never intended to respect my boundaries. They had simply found a way to get what they wanted in my compliance through deception rather than confrontation. On the dining table sat the remains of breakfast and a note. While Grandma settled in her favorite chair, I picked it up with shaking hands. Dear Maria, we left around 9 a.m. Grandma has had breakfast. There are 3 days of prepared meals in the fridge. Instructions are attached. Emergency numbers are on the fridge. Make sure she takes her 2 p.m. medication. With love, Mom. The casual presumption that I would simply comply with their plans after being deliberately deceived filled me with a rage so intense it made me dizzy. The words "with love" felt like a slap across my face. I need to make a call, I told Grandma, fighting to keep my voice steady. I'll be right back. I went to the kitchen and dialed Mom. After several rings, she finally answered, her voice falsely bright. Oh, Maria, you made it. How's Grandma? What the hell are you thinking? I couldn't contain my fury. How could you pull something so underhanded after I explicitly said no? Maria, please calm down, Mom said in that infuriating soothing tone she used whenever I expressed emotions she found inconvenient. We knew you'd come through. You're always so dependable. I'm not your on-call caregiver, I said, each word precise and sharp. I only agreed to a morning visit. I never agreed to watch Grandma for 3 whole days. But you're there now, aren't you? She replied, her tone hardening. You can't just leave her alone. She needs you. Something inside me, something that had been building for 50 years, finally shattered. This is elder abandonment, I said, my voice turning ice cold. Do you have any idea what happens when I call Adult Protective Services? I heard her gasp. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I replied. If you're not back soon, that's exactly who I'm calling next. Wait. Mom's panic was palpable. We're still at the venue entrance. The concert hasn't started. Then leave and come back. I'm staying for 1 hour. If you're not here by then, I'm calling the authorities. Maria, please. 1 hour, I repeated and hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the kitchen counter to steady myself. 50 years of surrendering, of putting their needs first, of being the reliable, self-sacrificing daughter, and this was how they repaid me. With manipulation and deceit. When I turned around, Grandma Eleanor was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching me with clear, lucid eyes that held none of the confusion I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Sit down, Maria, she said in a voice so strong and coherent it startled me. It's time we had a talk. The truth revealed. What do you mean? I asked, staring at Grandma Eleanor's steady gaze, so different from the confused expression she'd worn for the past 2 years. I don't have dementia, she said simply. What? I froze in shock. You seem surprised, she smiled, a familiar glint of intelligence in her eyes, the same look she'd given me decades ago when discussing literary symbolism or analyzing poetry. After my hip surgery, I was indeed confused temporarily, but I recovered months ago. I just didn't tell the family. I sank into a kitchen chair, trying to process this revelation. But why? Why would you pretend? I wanted to see how they would treat me, she explained, sitting across from me with surprising grace for a woman of 78. And more importantly, how they would treat you. The implications of what she was saying slowly dawned on me. You've been testing them? Observing, she corrected. They think I'm having dementia, so they speak freely in front of me. You'd be surprised what people will say when they think you can't understand. A month before the Bob Dylan concert, I'd entered Grandma's room with her evening medication and found her sitting by the window, writing in a notebook. The moment I'd appeared, she quickly closed it and resumed her confused demeanor. That brief glimpse of clarity had troubled me, but I dismissed it as a momentary improvement. I've known about their concert plan for weeks, Grandma continued. They discussed everything in front of me, laughing about how they'd trick you into staying if you refused. But why have you kept quiet until now? I asked, still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of this deception, both hers and my family's. I was waiting for the right moment, she said meaningfully. Maria, they've taken you for granted for years, but this time is different. This time, it's your opportunity to break free from their control. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small key. In my bedroom, under the loose floorboard beneath the window seat, there's a box. Bring it here. Bewildered, I followed her instructions. In her room, the same room where she'd recuperated after her surgery, where I'd spent countless hours reading to her, adjusting her pillows, helping her with physical therapy exercises, I found the box exactly where she described. It was an old wooden jewelry box, its cherry finish worn smooth with age. When I returned to the kitchen, Grandma opened it with the key and removed a thick folder of documents. I wanted to show you these later, but circumstances have changed our timeline. Inside were legal papers, including a new will dated 6 months earlier. I read it with mounting astonishment. Grandma's assets, her beach house in Florida, her considerable savings, and the investment portfolio inherited from Grandpa were all being left to me. Grandma, this is. Words failed me. The right thing, she said firmly. I met with a lawyer months ago and showed evidence that they lied about my cognitive abilities. They were trying to gain control of my assets by claiming I was incompetent. These recordings, she pointed to a small digital device in the box, contain conversations where your parents discussed managing my money once I was out of the way in a care facility. I felt sick. They were going to put you in a home? After making me promise never to do that, only after they secured control of my finances, she said grimly. Your father has made some poor investments recently. They need my money. The betrayal cut deep, and not just of me, but of this proud, intelligent woman who had nurtured me when my parents couldn't be bothered, who had seen value in me when they saw only utility. What do we do now? I asked, suddenly feeling like the lost child I'd been decades ago, seeking Grandma's wisdom. Her eyes lit up with an unexpected sparkle of adventure. We leave, she said simply. I've made arrangements. My doctor has provided documentation of my cognitive clarity. My lawyer has finalized the paperwork transferring my assets. We can be in Florida by nightfall. Florida? I echoed. My beach house, our beach house now, she corrected. I've been planning this escape for months, waiting for them to show their true colors so completely that even you couldn't excuse them anymore. I thought about my apartment with its half-finished novel, my job that had never fulfilled me, my life constructed around my family's expectations. They'll be furious, I said quietly. Undoubtedly, Grandma agreed. But ask yourself this, Maria, after 50 years of putting their happiness above your own, what do you truly owe them? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Mom again. Have you packed everything? Grandma asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. I looked at the phone, then back at this remarkable woman who had secretly been my ally all along. For the first time in decades, I felt the stirring of something long dormant, not just anger or resentment, but possibility. Freedom. I silenced the phone and smiled. The Florida beaches are waiting for us. The social media battle. After our week in Florida, days spent walking barefoot on the white sand beaches, evenings on the porch watching the sunset while Grandma Eleanor shared stories of her teaching years, we returned to reality. I spent a quiet morning in my apartment responding to work emails and messages from Sarah, carefully avoiding the flood of texts and voicemails from my family. The beach house had been everything Grandma had described: a modest but charming two-bedroom cottage with faded blue shutters and a wraparound porch, just steps from the Gulf of Mexico. There, surrounded by the rhythm of waves and free from decades of expectations, I'd written more of my novel in 1 week than I had in the previous year. You have a gift, Maria, Grandma had said, reading my pages each evening. I always knew it, even when you were 16 and showed me those first short stories. I remembered those moments, slipping my creative writing assignments to Grandma after Mom had dismissed them with a curt, "This won't pay the bills." Grandma would return them with thoughtful comments and encouragement. "Your voice matters," she would write in her elegant teacher's script. Now, back in my apartment, I felt different, stronger somehow. I'd left a note for my parents explaining that Grandma and I had gone away together, that she was perfectly lucid, and that we would contact them when we returned. I deliberately left out details about where we were going or when we'd be back. That afternoon, as I scrolled through Facebook to message Sarah about our coffee date, my blood boiled. There on my timeline was a post from Mom that had already garnered dozens of sympathetic comments. Such a disappointing holiday, she'd written. It breaks my heart when someone abandons their own family. My poor mother was so confused and upset when she was taken away without explanation. I never realized how easily family bonds could break. The comments poured in. So sad, Diana. Young people today just don't understand responsibility. Abandoning your own grandmother is the worst. Family must come first. Some people just don't get it. My hands shook as I took screenshots. Though she hadn't named me, everyone in our social circle knew exactly who she meant, and she had completely twisted the truth. Grandma hadn't been confused or taken away, she had been the architect of our escape, clear-minded and determined. I thought about my options. I could ignore it, as I'd ignored so many manipulations over the years. I could call her privately and demand she retract the post. Or I could do something I'd never done before, publicly stand up for myself. Fueled by a new sense of self-worth and the righteous anger of seeing Grandma's agency denied, I crafted my own post. Time for the truth, I wrote. Yesterday, I visited my family as promised. Upon arrival, I discovered everyone had already left for a Bob Dylan concert, expecting me to care for my grandmother for 3 days after I explicitly refused. When threatened with a report for elder abandonment, they returned home. Now I'm accused of not caring about family. The reality? My grandmother is perfectly lucid and chose to travel with me. She has documentation from her doctor confirming her cognitive clarity. The true abandonment came from those who attempted to use both of us for their convenience. True family is built on mutual respect, not manipulation. My finger hovered over the post button. This would permanently damage my relationship with my family. It would make public a private conflict. It would change everything. I remembered all the times I'd stayed silent to keep peace. All the dreams deferred, boundaries crossed, dignity compromised. I thought of Grandma, who at 78 had found the courage to stage a rebellion against those who would diminish her. With a deep breath and trembling hands, I pressed the button. The reactions exploded immediately. Sarah commented first, "So proud of you for standing up for yourself." Then came a wave of supportive messages from friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances who had witnessed my family's treatment of me over the years. By evening, my social media had exploded with family backlash. Mom accused me of disgracefully exposing private family matters. Dad told me to act like an adult. Michael and Jennifer claimed I was betraying the family. Cousins and distant relatives I barely knew piled on with criticism. Yet simultaneously, my post spread far beyond my network. Strangers began sharing it with comments like, "I've been the family caregiver for years too." Blood relation doesn't entitle them to abuse your boundaries. My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications until I finally turned it off and called Grandma, who was staying at a hotel nearby until we decided on our next steps. "They're attacking me online," I told her, my voice shaky despite my resolve. "Of course they are," she replied calmly. "You've challenged the narrative they've built that you exist to serve their needs. They won't surrender that control easily." The next morning, Sarah called early. "Maria, this is completely blown up. Your post is everywhere. Several major blogs have picked it up." "What?" I rubbed my eyes and grabbed my phone. Notifications flooded my screen. My post had thousands of shares, with countless people sharing similar experiences. Online news sites were featuring my story in articles about elder care ethics and family boundaries. "I never wanted to go viral," I whispered, overwhelmed by the attention. "This wasn't my intention. But your story is touching so many people," Sarah said. "What you're describing is something countless others have suffered in silence." That afternoon brought a shocking twist. Mom posted again, "I need to set the record straight. My previous post was written in haste. My husband, my son, and his wife, and I had unfair expectations of our daughter, Maria. We disrespected her boundaries and tried to use her as free elder care." Her response was justified. "I sincerely apologized publicly." I stared at my screen in disbelief. Mom never apologized, especially not publicly. The explanation came moments later in a text from Grandma. "I had a serious conversation with your mother. Their behavior was disgraceful. They've agreed to publicly apologize to you. However, this isn't enough. They've been exploiting you for years. I believe we should consider legal options. Legal options? That seemed extreme, but my perspective quickly shifted that evening. While ignoring mom's calls, I opened an email from dad. What I read made my blood boil. Maria, we've apologized publicly as your grandmother demanded, but you need to examine your own actions. Threatening elder abuse reports was completely excessive. We just needed a few days of help. Your dramatic overreaction has humiliated our entire family in front of colleagues and friends. You are no longer welcome at family gatherings until you apologize and remove your inflammatory post. I forwarded the email to Grandma immediately, my hands shaking with rage. Their public apologies were completely hollow. They still blamed me and were even trying to cut me out of the family for daring to stand up for myself. Grandma called me minutes later, her voice hard with anger. This is outrageous. They haven't learned a thing. Maria, we need to consult with a lawyer immediately. This is clear harassment. Is that really necessary? I asked, the thought of legal action against my own family still unimaginable despite everything. They won't stop, Grandma said firmly. They've shown who they truly are. Now we must show them who we've become. The legal battle, following Grandma's advice, I met with family law attorney Olivia Morrow the next day. Her office was warm and inviting, with shelves of legal books and framed diplomas that spoke of decades of experience. She listened attentively to my story, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair with a grave expression. Ms. Hartfield, this goes well beyond a family disagreement, she said. The behavior of your parents and brother constitutes psychological harassment. The public defamation on social media could be considered libel, and their abandonment of your grandmother raises serious elder abuse concerns. Should I really take legal action against my own family? I asked, feeling the weight of the decision. I thought of Christmas dinners, childhood birthdays, the complicated tapestry of memories that made up our shared history. Despite everything, these people were my blood. Let's begin with a formal warning letter, Olivia suggested. We'll inform them that continued harassment will result in legal proceedings. It's a measured first step. I agreed, and Olivia sent formal warnings to my parents, Michael and Jennifer. But instead of calming the situation, this only poured gasoline on the fire. After receiving the letters, Mom went on the warpath. She posted that I was an ungrateful daughter trying to sue her own family who only wanted help with her sick grandmother. Dad publicly called me emotionally unstable and insisted my claims were wildly exaggerated. Michael and Jennifer joined the attack, labeling me an attention seeker and declaring my story pure fiction. Their vicious response left me no choice. I met with Olivia again and made the painful decision to file a lawsuit for defamation and emotional distress. I know this isn't easy, Olivia said gently as I signed the paperwork, my hand trembling slightly. But it's necessary to protect both you and your grandmother. The day we filed the lawsuit, my emotions were in complete turmoil. I kept thinking about my 16th birthday when Dad had surprised me with a beautifully bound collection of classic novels. Or how Mom had stayed up all night helping me with a college application essay. How Michael had taught me to ride a bike, running alongside until I found my balance. Despite everything, these people were my family, but their actions weren't just a one-time mistake. They represented years of exploitation and disrespect that I could no longer ignore. Grandma Eleanor was my rock throughout the process. She not only supported my decision, but offered to testify, revealing how she had been mentally documenting the family's treatment of me for years. I pretended my memory was worse than it was. She confessed one evening as we sat in my apartment, reviewing case documents. I wanted to see who truly cared about me versus who saw me as a burden or an asset. I remembered how my parents had behaved differently when they thought Grandma couldn't understand their impatience, their dismissive comments, their calculations about her finances. I thought of the contrast with my own interactions with her, the hours I'd spent reading to her, discussing books, sharing stories, even when I believed her cognition was impaired. The legal battle dragged on for months, completely shattering whatever remained of our family relationships. My parents, Michael, and Jennifer refused all contact except through attorneys. Extended family members were forced to choose sides. most aligned with my parents in the name of family loyalty, but Grandma and a few others, including my mother's younger sister Janet, stood firmly with me. The case moved forward faster than expected. Olivia methodically presented evidence of the years-long pattern of exploitation, the concert day incident, and the vicious social media campaign that followed. Grandma's testimony proved devastating to my parents' case, as she revealed with crystal clarity how they had systematically taken advantage of me for years. The most damning evidence came from the social media posts and private messages. My parents' own words exposed their malicious intent more effectively than anything else could have. I will never forget my father's face as the judge announced her ruling. The man who had taught me about responsibility, who had instructed me to always honor my commitments, looked utterly bewildered as if he could not comprehend how his actions had led to this moment. The court finds that the actions of Diana Hartfield, Robert Hartfield, Michael Hartfield, and Jennifer Hartfield constituted clear harassment of Maria Hartfield and caused severe emotional distress, the judge declared. Family relationships must be founded on mutual respect, and the defendants have fundamentally violated this principle. Additionally, their abandonment of Eleanor Willoughby, despite her cognitive challenges they themselves emphasized, demonstrates a disturbing disregard for elder welfare. The judge issued a restraining order against my family, awarded substantial damages for defamation and emotional distress, and ordered them to publicly retract their false statements with a court-approved apology. Leaving the courtroom, my heart felt both lighter and heavier simultaneously. I'd won my case and defended my boundaries, but the cost was losing half my family forever. You did exactly what was necessary, Grandma whispered, squeezing my hand with surprising strength as we walked down the courthouse steps. Some wounds may heal with time, but you must never compromise your dignity or self-worth for anyone, even family. The aftermath. In the months following the verdict, the ripple effects spread far beyond our immediate family. The case had been covered extensively in local media, devastating my parents' carefully cultivated community reputations. Dad was forced into early retirement from his accounting firm after 30 years when clients began requesting different representatives. Mom resigned from her executive position at the marketing company when colleagues stopped including her in meetings. Their social circles shrank rapidly as former friends distanced themselves from the scandal. Michael and Jennifer's real estate business suffered immediate consequences. Potential clients researched them online only to find stories about elder abandonment and harassment. Within 6 months, they were forced to sell their luxury home and downsize dramatically. I took no pleasure in their downfall. Despite everything, there was a part of me that grieved for what might have been the family we could have been if love had been unconditional, if respect had been mutual. Meanwhile, Grandma moved in with me. Together, we renovated my small apartment to accommodate her needs while preserving her independence. The second bedroom became hers, decorated with cherished photographs and mementos from her teaching years. We installed grab bars in the bathroom, widened doorways for her walker, and created a comfortable reading nook by the living room window. With her encouragement, I reduced my copywriting hours and enrolled in creative writing courses, finally pursuing my long-held dream. The novel I'd been secretly working on for years began to take shape under the guidance of a published author who taught at the local community college. You have a natural voice, my writing instructor told me after reading my chapters. There's authenticity in your work, especially in how you write about family dynamics and self-discovery later in life. 1 year after the court verdict, my life had transformed completely. At 51, I was living a life I'd never imagined possible at 20 or 30 or even 45. With Grandma's support, I'd reduced my copywriting to part-time, focusing instead on my first novel while taking advanced writing classes. Grandma, thriving in our shared home despite being nearly 80, had started a small online community for seniors exploring their creative talents. It's never too late to become who you might have been, she would tell her group, quoting George Eliot. The pain of family betrayal still occasionally surfaced, especially around holidays or when I encountered old family friends who didn't know how to act around me anymore. But I reminded myself that my decisions had been necessary. I won't make space in my life for people who see me as nothing but a convenient caregiver, I told Sarah during one of our regular coffee dates. It sounds harsh, but protecting myself was essential. It's not harsh, Sarah replied, squeezing my hand. It's healthy. You spent 50 years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Though the wounds would never completely heal, I walked forward with a confidence I'd never before possessed. Grandma and I had created our chosen family, one based on mutual respect and genuine love. Our small circle included Sarah, a few loyal friends, my Aunt Janet, and the writing community I'd joined. One evening, as Grandma and I sat on our small balcony watching the sunset, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." She smiled. Inside was a publishing contract. My novel, The Late Bloomer, about a woman in her 50s who discovers her voice after a lifetime of silence, had been accepted by a small but respected publishing house. "How did you?" I began, stunned. "I may have sent your manuscript to a former student who became an editor," Grandma said with a wink. "But they're publishing it because it's good, Maria. Because your voice matters." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the contract, then at this remarkable woman who had changed my life by believing in me when no one else did. "Our story isn't over," she said softly. "It's just beginning." As I signed my name on the contract, my real name, not a pseudonym, because I was no longer afraid to stand in my truth, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't standing up to strangers, but to those we love. Sometimes the family we need isn't the one we're born into, but the one we create through choice and mutual respect. Grandma and I had lost much, but we had gained something precious: the freedom to be fully ourselves, the dignity of setting boundaries, and the joy of pursuing long deferred dreams. Our story would serve as a reminder to others trapped in similar situations that it is never too late to reclaim your life, that exploitation, even from family, should never be tolerated, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say no to those who would diminish you. And as our story reached others through my book, through Grandma's senior community, through the media coverage of our case, we received letter after letter from women like me, women who had spent decades as the family caretaker, the reliable daughter, the convenient solution to everyone else's problems. "You gave me courage to set my own boundaries," they wrote. "You showed me it's never too late." And in those messages, I found the ultimate vindication. Our pain had purpose. Our struggle had meaning. Our voices, finally heard, were echoing far beyond our small apartment, helping others find their own path to freedom. This, Grandma said one evening, holding up a particularly moving letter from a 62-year-old woman who had finally stood up to her exploitative children. "This is why we fought. This is our legacy." I nodded, understanding at last that some families are built not by blood but by choice, not by obligation but by love, not by history but by respect. And in that knowledge, I found peace.